All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope you're having a wonderful start to another wonderful weekend. And as you can see, I'm joined by someone very special indeed. And I'm very, very delighted to say that we are in wonderful company with the Chief Communications Officer of La Liga, Joris Evers. Hello. How are you? Long time no see. How you been?
I'm doing fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So nice to see you. I wish we could see each other in person instead of seeing each other via Skype. And I'd love to come visit you in Barcelona. But if from my home in Madrid, it's springtime. I see jasmine blossoming in people's gardens. The sun is out, the blue sky. There's, I think lots of birds chirping in the city, and more and more I see people coming outside as well, which is great. I think, I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to have this feeling that, I've kind of lost count of the weeks that I haven't been out of the house, or far from the house, I should say.
Right.
I think it's 8 weeks or 9 weeks or something like that, but it feels like also in La Liga that we're nearing the new normal.
Yeah.
We're going towards some form of a light
Yes.
at the end of this tunnel.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And with the sun being out and everything else too, it feels like it's a great time for football to come back, hopefully sometime soon, because we all certainly miss it. And we have plenty we could talk about, loads to talk about in terms of La Liga. But before we get there, I definitely want to talk about you and your past and your background, because even though you and I have talked about it before, but for those people who maybe haven't had a chance to know about your background, you have a really, really fascinating career path. And so,
well, if you say so,
personally, I think so.
Judge.
Personally,
It's been fun.
I think so.
I admit it's been fun. I like what I've done in my life. I certainly haven't been bored. Maybe been privileged in some senses that I've been able to work in some interesting places. But I always meet or encounter other people that have done so many more amazing things than me. But for sure, we can talk about anything you'd like to talk about.
Okay. Well, I mean, listen. So you're originally from the Netherlands.
Yes.
Speak 5 languages. You eventually moved over to another wonderful country that we know as the United States. And of course, I only say that because I'm American. But anyway, before you got into becoming an executive for La Liga, you actually started out way back when as a journalist, before you even started out your career path in PR and communication. So how was that?
Good. I think I always was, and I wasn't a sports journalist. Some people might guess that working in La Liga now or working in a sports league now must mean that you've been into sports your entire life, which in my case actually is not true. I did grow up in the city of Haarlem in the Netherlands, which is where Harlem, New York, got its name. Right? There's so many cities in the U.S. that got their name from Dutch cities. So I grew up in Haarlem, which actually at FC Haarlem is where Ruud Gullit, or maybe people know him as Ruud Gullit, or however you pronounce his name.
We butchered his name. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, Ruud Gullit. He used to play there a long time ago. So I grew up in Haarlem. My brother, my younger brother, he used to play in the same club that Ruud Gullit used to play. So hey,
Really?
but
Wow.
well, because they obviously had a youth program and anybody could sign up to play there.
Sure.
But I won't talk much more about that. But actually, yeah, I grew up there in Haarlem. I was always I'm more of a I'm a geek, but not a football geek. I actually am a geek more in the traditional sense of the word. I'm a technology geek. I was always very much into tech. I was always very much into gadgets and building websites and coding in BASIC. When that was a thing. Playing with computers when we had floppy disks and even.
Oh my God! Yeah, of course.
I had my Commodore 64 with a cassette, that recorded the data. I was programming my own little games and dialing in when you didn't have these kinds of wonderful fiber optic connections that we have now, dialing into bulletin boards and things like that. My world was totally geek and pre-internet and then internet and all that kind of stuff. So my journalism career was very much technology journalism. Right. When technology was still very new, when the internet was new, when it was just coming around. So I was a technology journalist for about 10 years. before I then jumped the fence, or some people say sold my soul, or went to the dark side,
Oh, right. Because you went corporate at that point,
I
right?
went corporate, yeah. I went to work on the corporate communication side of things. And at that time, as you were saying, I had moved from the Netherlands to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, because, if you're a geek,
you have to go there. It's the Mecca for technology.
Right. Yeah, you go to Mecca, right?
Yeah.
I went to San Francisco, and I wanted to be where everything happened from a tech perspective. Sure. I worked in technology journalism in San Francisco for 4 years, and then started working in a technology company.
That we all well know as McAfee, right? Or was that later on?
McAfee or McAfee or
McAfee. God, I don't even know how to pronounce it. McAfee.
Yeah. So, right. An antivirus or cybersecurity company, right. which is a lot of fun. Like I was a cybersecurity journalist, and then I jumped into the corporate comm side at the cybersecurity company, right. and it was a lot of fun. The mostly fun part is because now, but also then, it was really about kind of cops and robbers. But in the virtual world, right. like cyber criminals trying to steal stuff like your personal data, or trying to steal corporate secrets, or maybe people remember things like viruses that used to hit computers, right?
Oh yeah, I remember. Even my dad all the time was like, "Be careful whatever browser you use, or be careful whatever page you open, because you're going to crash the whole computer."
Right, and not just your own computer; that it would shut down networks, it would cripple the internet, things like that. We used to have a lot of that, and not so much anymore. I think our cybersecurity has gotten a lot better. I'm sure there's still a lot of things happening on the cybersecurity side, but you don't see it as much anymore. Your own computer doesn't get shut down by a virus as much anymore as it did, like 10, 15, 20 years ago. Right. So I ended up working about 5 years at McAfee. It was a great, learning experience for me as my first job on the other side of the fence, in corporate communications, working on a global level, with people all around the world, to promote, of course, as a communications person, you're promoting your company, you're promoting the product. You want more people to know about you. You want more people to buy your product, to subscribe to your antivirus or your cybersecurity software service. And things like that, and help the leaders of the company to be better known in the world of cybersecurity and all these kinds of things. So I worked on that for 5 years in the cybersecurity space.
And then you went to Netflix as well. And for both companies, you were very much involved in helping them to rebuild their brand, to make them powerhouse names as well outside of the US. Right? Or did you have other roles apart from that too? But I think that was like your main role, was to help them really blossom outside of the framework of the United States.
Yeah, it was a key part in the case of McAfee or McAfee. Like if you're from the UK, you say McAfee. If you're from the US, you say McAfee.
Right.
By the way, some people know John McAfee, who was actually the guy who started this company a long time ago, I think in the 90s. And he's a very eccentric figure. And he made a bunch of money with his company. And he then actually sold it and got out of it. And he has a very, interesting past. So if you ever wanted to watch some documentaries or Google John McAfee and find out, about this guy's life, it's fascinating. But it involves Belize and like sort of, different kinds of herbal medicine and stuff like that. So strange stories.
Shamanic rituals and
yeah. So if you are bored at home, there's no yet, and you're like want to go down a path where you learn about something that you maybe have never heard about before, John McAfee is one place to go. But anyway. He had nothing to do with the company anymore, long before I joined that company. But our challenge was different. There were other things that had happened in Silicon Valley, specifically relating to financial activities and things like stock option backdating, which was affecting the corporate reputation of many companies in the Silicon Valley at that time. Now we're talking about, 2007. So this is a while ago. And the challenge was to rebuild the reputation of this company, right. As a world leader in cybersecurity, very clean, very transparent, open and honest. And then, we ultimately sold the company to Intel. It has since been spun off again and is now independent, but, this is the history. I joined Netflix in 2011. It was actually a little bit of an anecdote around how I ended up joining Netflix is because I was, after McAfee was sold, kind of done working at McAfee. Most of the people that I really enjoyed working with, a lot of the executive rank left, and I wanted to do something different after 5 years. And we had just bought a house in the same town as Netflix is based in, so it's called Los Gatos, the Cats, California. And in the south of the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley. And the reason for me to look at the job at Netflix was because I wanted to work at a company that was bicycling distance from our house.
Of course, because bicycling, it's in your veins as a Dutchman, right?
Exactly. It's like I didn't want to be commuting. I like sitting in long commutes and driving through Silicon Valley roads and forever. Now at least you can listen to podcasts, where those were not that big then yet. It was not what I wanted to do. So I found out that Netflix was a company in Los Gatos, the biggest employer actually in that town, and reached out to somebody I knew there and asked if there was a potential opportunity for a communications person with some international background to join the ranks.
Nice.
And I ended up having a beer with the then chief communications officer, and beer turned into beer and appetizers, and it turned into beer and appetizers and dinner, and into beer and appetizers and dinner and dessert, and then a job offer 2 weeks later. So
brilliant.
Yeah, and Netflix was a lot of fun. I've been very, I think, very privileged in a sense to being able to be part of that story of growing from, Netflix being in only the US and Canada when I joined, with DVDs, these round.
Yeah, I remember. We had to order them, and they would come in the mail, and you could only have 3 maximum at a time. But then you had to send one back before you could order a new one.
Yeah, those things, the red envelopes.
Yeah, the red envelopes with the white on the front, the red on the back.
Right, right. And you flip them around so you can ship the DVD back, in the same envelope.
Exactly.
Very environmentally conscious. So the DVD business was the biggest business of Netflix when I joined, and streaming was something that was still relatively new. Even though Netflix started streaming in 2007, but around 2011, streaming was still relatively limited. It only happened in the US, it only happened in Canada. The catalog of content, even people complain today about there's nothing on Netflix. Back then, it was all reruns, basically. It was nothing new. It was always old movies and old TV shows. There was nothing or unique or original or exclusive on Netflix,
Well, we've become spoiled for choice, haven't we? So
yeah, so the idea of streaming was something that was still, nascent, and that the internet was good enough to do that, right? Now we are doing this via the internet, and now you do TV shows from your home via the internet, you can do almost anything. Back then, it was almost like streaming is complicated, how can the internet bear this and things like that. So my job was to roll out this concept of watching TV via the internet. And the idea that, for people like you and me, for consumers, why should you always watch something when somebody else decides that something is on? Right now it's Tuesday night, so it's drama night. Right now it's Wednesday night, so it's comedy night. You should be in charge. You should be able to decide what you want to watch, when you want to watch it, how much of it you want to watch it. The consumer experience of being able to click and play and push pause and go to the bathroom,
like the TiVo back in the day too.
So much better. So introducing that around the world was basically part of my main job with the team at Netflix in terms of communicating, and then launching the service from the US and Canada to include South America, to include all of Europe, to include Asia, and then all of the world, and to really just explain what is streaming and why is internet TV something you would want. And literally today, everybody's like, of course you want that. Everybody wants internet TV. But back then it was something that, people were like, I can't understand it. Just like when the mobile phone first came out, everybody's like, why would you need to have a phone that you can take with you,
Yeah.
Today it's, common sense. Everybody does it.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing how much technology has evolved and how quickly it's evolving all the time too. So let's fast forward then. And you, after you were with Netflix, you went back to Amsterdam, to Holland for a few years, I think it was. You actually came to Madrid, where you are now, where you've been for the last 3 years or so with La Liga. And
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
right,
I moved back to Europe. Like, actually, my plan was never to move back to Europe, but Netflix actually ultimately moved me back to Europe, me and my
right.
family, because then while I was living in the US, I met somebody. We had one kid. All this kind of thing, right? Um, and
As you know, as you do, as it happens.
life happens, right? So got married, all this kind of thing. And then Netflix, as we were rolling Netflix out around the world, included we also included an office in Europe, and the office is still the Netflix Europe, Middle East, and Africa headquarters is still in Amsterdam.
Right.
So I was offered the opportunity to help open up, the office in Amsterdam and to build the team for Netflix here in Europe, and of course do all the launches, from through all of Europe, launch Netflix in all these markets. And so did that, and then once Netflix was global, and once Netflix really transitioned to being more of a studio, like a content production company,
right,
where this kind of storytelling around, hey, why is internet TV better than traditional TV? Why should you be streaming? That kind of became, okay, been there, done that.
Right.
Now we're going to be full on promoting shows, movies, documentaries, blah, 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 blah. That's when I left Netflix, and took a few months off, and then joined La Liga. And moved to Madrid, and so that was 3 years ago, and it's almost my 3-year anniversary at La Liga, and it's been an amazing.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an amazing time.
So whenever you joined, did you have any particular, because as you said, you weren't necessarily a sports person when you were growing up. This is something really new for you, the whole football industry and sports industry. Did you have any particular goals or aims that you were hoping to achieve with La Liga, and have you been able to achieve any of those yet?
Well, so for part of the reason for me to join La Liga was exactly as you said. Like sports was another world that I've been following, another world that I've ever worked in, and I have to admit, like yes, growing up in the Netherlands, you follow football because it's just like growing up in any other European country. And not me, but my brother, like I said, he played football when he was younger.
He must be so jealous of where you work now, by the way.
Yeah, he might be. Right now, I think he might. He has a travel business in Ecuador, and he runs travel through South America. From Colombia down to Argentina and Chile.
Oh, that's pretty cool too, though.
And that's really difficult right now. It's a really difficult business to be in, and they're going through a very, very rough time, like so many other people. So maybe right now he would prefer to work in football. I don't know. But yeah, no, it's also in football, people are going through a really hard time. It's true. We're having a happy chat here, but it's because I've tried to come back out of the dark days.
I think all of us have to be honest, so don't feel guilty about that.
Try to be hopeful that you have to work towards something, right? It's trying to keep that spirit and not to be beaten down too much. But yeah, no, I chose to come into La Liga because for many reasons it was going to be an adventure, and it was going to be a change. It was going to be different, and also completely honest, it would be culture shock, and understanding that it would be culture shock. And I wanted to see whether I could do that, professionally. I think that would be very interesting and it has been, amazing after 11 years of working in the Silicon Valley bubble, tech time, and venture capital, and like who's got the latest and greatest invention, and this, like, if you ever watched the series Silicon Valley on HBO, it's very much like that. It's real, and I was in that bubble, and it was amazing, and I never really wanted to get out of it. But then when I moved to Amsterdam, I was like, whoa,
there's a whole world outside of Silicon Valley that I forgot about.
Other things are happening, other things than technology. Oh, yeah. And then when I got a call asking me about this job in La Liga, I was like, oh, at first I honestly said, like, I'm not a football, I don't know that much about football. I'm not that crazy about football, and my Spanish is not that amazing. I speak some Spanish, but it's mostly holiday Spanish, a little bit more maybe, because my brother lives in Ecuador and I've traveled many times, so I speak some Ecuadorian style Spanish. Do you want me? And Javier Tebas, the president of La Liga, was like, yes, we want you. Exactly because of those reasons that you said. We don't want somebody necessarily coming from inside of the world of football, because there's a lot of people in the world of football that are from inside of the world of football. We want somebody who has experience in presenting and talking about an entertainment product, around the world and rolling it out around the world. Who can help us, professionalize in terms of how we communicate around La Liga and around our product, which is, it's a TV show in many senses, and it's entertainment. It's something that people watch to enjoy and they get very passionate about. And and that's so I had several conversations with him and other people in La Liga, and then came to visit Madrid, because if you're going to move your family somewhere, you want to make sure that this is a place you want to live, and that your wife and your kids and all this kind of thing that it's nice. And we were like, wow, this is going to be great. Actually many things about walking around in Madrid. When I'm walking around right now, when you smell, the blossoms and everything like that, and you see the palm trees and things like that, actually gave us a little bit of a sense of home, thinking about California, in some sense.
I can understand. I can see the parallels that you're drawing from now. Definitely.
Yeah. So decided to move here and start this adventure with La Liga.
No, it's amazing. And obviously they brought you in because you are an expert brand builder. So from all of the experiences that you did have with McAfee and with Netflix and helping to grow those names and those brands internationally, what would you say are some of the key elements or the key aspects that you learned from your time with those companies that you've been able to implement now with the La Liga comms team?
The very basics of it all is storytelling. Like the very basic part, our responsibility as a communications team in La Liga, but also working with other teams. Because when I joined, it was not just the communications team that was getting revamped and reinvented in La Liga. There was also a brand team being added. The digital team got like another level. We've gone also since then bigger into big data and analysis. So all of La Liga has had this big injection in terms of growth and professionalization over the last few years, led by Javier, which my part, the part of communication. At the core of that is storytelling. At the core of that is presenting the product. At the core of that is trying to get closer and with journalists. Because our role is to work with journalists, with media around the world. So that they better understand what is La Liga, so that they have more context about what La Liga is, have more ways of talking about La Liga. And when I talk about La Liga, some people don't realize that. I've come to understand. Like when I talk about La Liga, I'm talking about the league and all of the clubs. And everybody involved in it, the whole collective, right? I'm not just talking about the institution of La Liga, that the people that are working at Calle de Torre Laguna 60 when there's a normal, a normal time and we're sitting in our offices. I'm talking about the overall league, La Liga Santander, La Liga Smart Bank, all of the clubs, all of the players, all of the coaches, the cities, the people, the culture, the history around it. I always talk about we need to find human stories. We need to present the small clubs. We need to use the celebrity of the big clubs and the big stars to present stories of the smaller clubs and the smaller stars, because those stories oftentimes are even more interesting than a Messi headline, right? And I know you know this very well, and many people know this well, but it's something that if you go to a place like Indonesia or India, it's a little bit more challenging.
Sure. But I imagine like you mentioned Lionel Messi, obviously, because he is a global superstar and he is arguably the greatest player in the history of football. I imagine that using his name or his brand, his image has really helped. Has it been a very good vehicle of trying to help sell the brand of La Liga or the image of La Liga, as well as all of those other teams that you mentioned, all of the teams in the first and second division, as well as all the players? Has that been a very useful tool to have? using Lionel Messi?
It helps. It helps that people know a bit of something about. It depends on where you are. Some places people know a lot more about La Liga, and other places people know very little. And some places people might know Lionel Messi, for example, but may not know that he is a player in La Liga. Depends on where you are and
Sure.
who you're talking to.
That's interesting.
So it's a bit of a puzzle in that sense. We do see the fact that we have some pretty big brands in La Liga. From a club perspective or a player perspective, and in some cases those brands are bigger than the La Liga brand. So we have to take advantage. Well, we work with that to then promote the broader product. Because ultimately we would love for people to watch more of La Liga. We want them to watch more of you, Semra, around the world.
Oh, thank you. Although I'm pretty sure that they're more interested in watching the 22 players running around on the pitch kicking a football. But thank you.
Well, and you and everybody else on La Liga TV. That's the goal. So that's what we're working for.
And what would you say are some of the biggest emerging markets, or some of the markets that you guys are more interested in helping to try and grow at the moment, or places where you really feel like La Liga is actually starting to take off?
Well, I think traditionally or historically, La Liga has always had already a relatively strong following in Spanish-speaking countries, which is obvious, right? Because of the language.
So all of Latin America, basically Mexico, all the way down.
Yeah. Also because historically, lots of if there were foreign players in La Liga, they came from those parts of the world, right?
Exactly.
And so we have been working very hard over the last few years to also grow in other parts. Maybe in parts that were more under the Anglo-Saxon influence before.
The USA.
Including the USA or Canada, but also places like India or Hong Kong, Singapore, China. Places like Indonesia, to try to grow football, to grow La Liga, but also to grow football around the world, and that's what we're working on very hard, with the different departments of La Liga. So it's not just the comms team, but we have, as you mentioned before, I think this La Liga Global Network where individuals, like around 44 individuals, were sent to 43 countries.
Like the delegates, right? That have just been deployed everywhere.
Boom. And they are an integral part, or they are an integral part of the work that we do from a comms perspective, from a PR perspective, because they are our people there in country, and they help tell the stories. We work from my team a lot with them to give them the materials that they need to help tell stories and to help promote the league everywhere around the world.
And what would you say would be some of the other strategies that have worked really well in terms of fan engagement? So not only engaging with fans that we already have in La Liga, but also trying to attract new ones.
No, mostly what we do, I think, from a comms or PR perspective, is try to either broaden the interest of existing fans, sure, so that they know more about La Liga and don't just follow 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4 teams. So that if you're already watching La Liga, that you'll watch more of it, right? That you feel like, oh, I need to watch these other matches too to be able to really understand all that's happening and the dynamic that's happening in this league. Or to get people that don't yet watch the league to get interested and to jump in and to want to watch it because we piqued your interest with a particular story or a particular other way of presenting the league to you. So we do that with working with media, also with some influencers around the world. We do things like bringing journalists from all over the world to Spain and showing them the different cities of La Liga. Sometimes we dangle, you can go to the Clásico with us, but that's really like the cherry on top of the cake. And then we bring them, along the way to visit, several other clubs. And usually what we do see is that people will fall in love with clubs like Eibar or they fall in love with the Leganés.
Of course, who doesn't love Super Pepino? I mean, come on.
Yeah, who doesn't love him? Yeah, so it's like these kinds of, we have to help the club sometimes or get the great stories out so that the journalists are like, oh, I never knew that, or all these anecdotes around the different clubs. Or we've taken many journalists to see Espanyol. So it's like, we want you to learn more so that when you go back home, you can report on football, and especially Spanish football,
right,
much better and in a much more informed way,
sure,
which will ultimately help us grow our audience and make people more interested in Spanish football.
No, definitely. And do you have any favorite anecdotes or experiences that you've ever had in terms of dealing with fans or trying to help grow these other, like a Leganés or an Eibar or smaller clubs, maybe they're not so well known outside of Spain? Do you have any particular anecdotes or any stories yourself that you really enjoyed from your time with La Liga?
Well, actually, this is something that maybe is not, well, you can tell me whether this counts or not,
Okay.
One of the things I liked, and one of the things that was actually kind of funny for me, shortly after I joined La Liga, we announced that we were working with Amazon Prime on this series called Six Dreams, right?
Yeah, of course.
And we actually had a press conference and announced a TV show with Amazon. And having just come from Netflix, I felt a little bit like betrayal in some sense.
The traitor.
But it's in good spirits. Where everybody, there's plenty of room for entertainment out there, and there's plenty of space for different streaming providers, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway. But one of the key things that I find so charming from Six Dreams is the story around Eibar and
yes.
the President Amaya and her lucky shoes, right?
I love it.
These kinds of anecdotes I think are so great, and just like and Super Pino, and Liga and how they have a little cucumber in the stadium, this kind of thing. Or the fact that in Espanyol, if you're an Espanyol fan and you die, you can have your ashes in the columbarium in the Espanyol stadium. These kinds of things I think are such great stories, and there are so many of them. Like I heard that in Ponferradina, yes, right, there is one English guy who goes to those matches, like a regular fan who goes there. And it's interesting. I really love these kinds of stories. And really, from the perspective of the league, we want to try to find as many stories as we can to promote as many clubs as we can, especially the smaller clubs.
And I think that's something that really sets La Liga apart from other leagues, is the fact that there are so many of these special, beautiful stories that no one's necessarily even heard of, but they're so fascinating, they're so interesting, and there's such a cultural aspect to it as well that it really just makes them, it does make you fall in love with all of the teams in La Liga. At least it happened for me. I mean, everyone asks me, who is your favorite team, who do you support? And honestly, it's like, back in the day I had a team, but now, after following all of the teams that are in the top flight each and every year, you fall in love with all of them for different reasons. And there's so many stories to be told. I 100% agree with you. So obviously now, though, shifting gears a little bit, because we've had the coronavirus pandemic unfolding over the last... Yeah, oh, really? We didn't know about that one.
You were able to get me out of this for a little bit,
Sorry, but I want to take it in a way that's like, it's created... or it's been able to, how can I put this? I imagine that it's allowed the team to face new challenges in a more creative way, let's say. So maybe there was already a planning in the short term, or there were goals that were established for the short term or the midterm, but now maybe things have had to shift a little bit because the team has had to have found more creative solutions to the situation, because there is no football right now, and there's always a demand for football, whether it's being played on the pitch or not. And so we've seen things like an esports competition or a global musical concert as well. I mean, ways of captivating fans and keeping them engaged with La Liga, even though for the last 2 months there hasn't been any football actually played. So what would you say has been some of the biggest challenges, I guess, in facing this at this particular time over the last couple of months? And how has the team adapted to it?
Well, I think that the team has done incredibly well. I mentioned it on a call this morning with my team. I think we're doing some of our best work now in really, really difficult circumstances. Everybody working from home. This is all brand new for everybody. Nobody's ever gone through any of this before. Everybody is experiencing all different kinds of emotions. I'm sure that people are stressed out, in many ways. Like some people might think you're more stressed out if you're in a house with 3 kids around you that you can't get to be quiet when you're on a conference call. But I'm sure that if you're all alone, sitting in a small apartment, in the center of Madrid, that you have all other, kind of challenges that also will make it difficult and emotional for you. And then you have this like, okay, what do we do now? Like there's no football. What do we do? How do we communicate, and how do we stay relevant to our fans? How do we give our fans, how do we give society and everybody something relevant, or something to maybe take their minds off some things as well, like to keep them entertained. I think our digital team, the social media team, has done an incredible job in terms of providing great content. We've had everybody in La Liga basically work to come up with ideas. Like the concert, La Liga Santander Fest that you mentioned. I think that gave me goosebumps when watching it. It was great. It was a lot of fun. It was very different. Music and football. I discovered many Spanish artists because, as you know, I'm not Spanish, so I discovered many Spanish artists and fell in love with some of them during this concert. I think the esports challenge, I have to admit, even being a geek, I've never been a video game geek. I was a technology geek, but never a video game geek.
Right.
It was the first time that I watched, somebody play FIFA, and I watched it on TV. I turned on the traditional, TV, watched the linear TV channel, Goal, and watched them show, the La Liga Santander or eBay challenge. And watch the final, which was actually a lot of fun. So I think people are discovering new things also during this period, and discovering things like esports, which is great. And in my case, discovering Spanish musicians. But yeah, it's not been easy, and now hopefully we'll be able to return back to some form of a normal, in the not too distant future.
So more in the long term then, what do you think would be the way forward for La Liga and for fans going forward in let's say in a year, 2 years, or several years from now?
Yeah, no, I think first and foremost, like this is a gradual approach to coming back, and Javier actually said it recently, talking to some journalists also, that, we're not really going to be back until stadiums are full of fans again. Like football is not really going to be back until we have fans in the stadiums and cheering on the teams, and and that we have our atmosphere and the feeling and the passion of Spanish football back fully. It's really unfortunate that we have to start with empty stadiums. But I think it's also important to start, that we have to come out of this. We have to come back, I'm having a little bit of these positive feelings, and also in this conversation with you, not just because it's spring, but because I have this feeling that we here in Spain are moving towards the end of this tunnel. That I need to go to the hairdresser. I think it's now open.
I think you look fine. Don't worry about it.
The hairdresser is opening. More. I keep getting emails from stores that are saying we're opening. I know maybe next week, depending on where you are in Spain, you'll have an opportunity to sit on a terrace and have a caña, this kind of thing. So I feel like as part of that, society coming back, football being also an important part of also Spanish society, not just a global entertainment product, no, but also an important part of Spanish society. Football should be coming back too. So this is what we're working on now, and this is what we're hopeful to be able to bring again soon.
So just to end on a positive, keep going with the positive vibes. What would you say is the one thing that you're most looking forward to about football eventually coming back, whether it is now in the next few months, or even more like, let's say in the future, whenever fans do eventually come back and fill the stadium? And what for you personally would you say is the one thing that you're most looking forward to?
Wow. Let's see. It would be fun to go see a match again with some friends. I actually, I've learned to love that a lot.
It's really good fun. It's good fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I would love to do that. I think in the shorter term, I would be looking forward to sitting on a terrace, actually. Like many people in Spain, the terraces are such a big part of life. and maybe see my colleagues, and my friends instead of I love my wife and my kids, but in addition to my wife and my kids, seeing some other people, have a drink with them, maybe do a barbecue in the backyard, these kinds of things, that's what I'm looking forward to like social life.
Yeah.
Instead of just looking at people on the screen, like I'm looking at you now, Semra. I love being able to talk to you on the screen, but in real life it will be even better.
Of course. I think all of us can very much relate with that. So on that note, I guess we can leave it here for now. Don't want to take up too much more of your time. It's been such a pleasure, though. I've really, really enjoyed talking with you, and it's been really nice to listen to everything you've had to talk about, really.
Pleasure is all mine, and I hope you're doing well, Semra, that you're okay in Barcelona.
I am, yes, I am. Thankfully. Now that we're allowed to go outdoors and do a little bit of exercise, it's definitely changed my mood and helped to lift my spirits, let's say. So, no, definitely we're doing well. Thank you very much.
And hopefully we'll see you also again soon back on TV presenting La Liga.
Fingers crossed. I'm very, very much looking forward to getting back to it. So,
Animo.
Animos. Great. Well, wonderful. Yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you as well as always for being with us here on TeaTimeTalks. We'll see you again very soon, tomorrow, in fact, for another chat at 1:30 local time here in Spain. So until then, take care of yourselves. We'll see you all soon. Adios.